The Week in Review show has begun, and we begin it as we do most weeks with John Ellis. He is the editor and founder of News Items, a one-stop shopping center in the morning at 6 a.m. for all the news of the day. And each week, John sends me a few stories that we should go over. And he begins with number one, the Haas plan. Now, John, Richard Haas has been on this program every time he's done a book. We sometimes agree, we sometimes don't agree. His last two Substack postings, I haven't agreed with at all. So what's the Haas plan? What's Richard think?
Well, the Haas plan is the Strait of Hormuz enables traffic from the Persian Gulf to get to the Gulf of Oman and then out to the Arabian Sea and out to its points, its destinations. The Iranians have, quote, shut down, end quote, the Strait of Hormuz. And so the question is, what do you do about that? The Iranians are letting through or have let through 90 tankers full of oil, some destined for China, some destined for India. So the Haas plan is to essentially set up a blockade in the Gulf of Oman that prevents any tanker that Iran is letting through the Strait of Hormuz from going any further. And so essentially it's a blockade of a blockade. And the message would be, look, unless you open up the Strait of Hormuz, no tankers are going to get through, which means you're not going to get the revenue that you get if the oil is delivered to China, and it will piss the Chinese off that they're not getting it, so they'll presumably pressure you to reopen the strait.
That's an excellent idea. No oil for us, no oil for you, but Carg Island might enter into this as well. That's not a permanent solution, though, John, and what has been laid bare is, in fact, just how crucial the Strait of Hormuz is. And the Iranians have been threatening for years to close it. They've never had the ability until they built the missile array. Can we allow it to remain there, exposed?
No, we can't. No, we can't. I mean, I think you should sponsor with the service academies and the leading, diplomacy institutes a contest who can come up with the best idea of how to resolve the Strait of Hormuz issue, because it's absolutely critical that it be resolved. The longer it goes on, the greater the economic impact. And it's not just that the price of gas goes up. It's a little bit like dominoes, where if this happens, then that happens, and then that happens, and all of it is bad. So it's essential that it be resolved. And the terrible thing is the Iranians have gotten better at mines, sea mines that, you think of mines as something kind of like big balls that float on the top of the ocean and, a battleship runs into them and blows up like in the World War II movies. But now they're anchored to the floor and you can't see them. By acoustics, when the destroyer, U.S. destroyer gets close, the mine gets off. You need minesweepers to take care of that, and as it happens, the U.S. Navy has none.
Yeah, I'm told by a retired 06 that some of our high-tech people have got some solutions, but we'll be testing them in real time. We have no minesweepers. We're running through our Tomahawks and indeed through everything. But if we win, I think it's going to be worth it. And by win, I mean regime alteration, not replacement, just coercion into a non-fanatical, theocratic regime. Where do you think we are in this, John?
I think it's a toss-up. I mean, it really depends on how much pain the Iranians are willing to withstand. They showed that they're willing to withstand unlimited pain in the Iran-Iraq war. It strikes me that those days are different from these days, and it's certainly the case that U.S. and Israeli firepower is exponentially more lethal than what they were up against in the Iraq war.
But some of the men at the top of this regime walked through minefields as 10 years old. I like to remind people that this generation was the product of the 1988 death match with Iraq, which was as bloody and as brutal a war as any. It's like Ukraine, Russia right now, maybe even worse, but they are not for bending very easily. They have to be broken. Let's talk a little bit about the politics of it, John Ellis. Harry Anton, of all people, CNN, did a poll of self-described MAGA voters. 100% of his polling sample support Donald Trump. Now, some people might have opted out of MAGA by virtue of what's happened over the last 3 weeks, but it's still a pretty stunning number. It's not fractured.
Well, there are two narratives in what we call the mainstream media at the moment. One is that the MAGA base is fracturing, and the other is that the great blue wave is coming. The MAGA fracturing story is simply not true. Enton had, 100%. NBC News had 85%. I've seen other stuff that says 90% of the, quote, MAGA base, end quote, is sticking with President Trump. So that's, that narrative is wrong. And the second narrative, the blue wave, nothing like that is going to happen. There's 17 seats that are maybe going to go the Democratic way, maybe not. There are 3 more that you could make the case that they could go Democratic, but anything like the normal historical average of 26 seat switch, it seems extremely unlikely. And that's not, that's not just me saying that. That's, Charlie Cook, whose Cook Political Report is as good as any in terms of analyzing elections, has pretty much said the same thing. So.
No, I think if John Cornyn wins his Senate primary, he has a layup against Tallarino, but I also think Tallarino probably beats Ken Paxton. I don't think Graham Plattner can beat Susan Collins. That would be very strange. North Carolina is a toss-up. Ossoff is a tough candidate. Michigan's always tough for Republicans. And John Husted in Ohio is a pretty good candidate, but so is Sherrod Brown. It's possible to lose the Senate. John, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yes. I think the range is no change to +1 Democrat. So +3 R to +1 D.
Oh, D.
I mean, we don't know.
It's going to be a wild. To that end, I have been urging Republicans put their arms around the war, throw the $250 million or $1 billion onto a reconciliation bill, jam it through the House and the Senate, and stand by Trump and say we have to take Iran off the map because they're stuck with the war anyway. They might as well be patriotic about it.
Well, the other thing is the Democrats appear to be hoping that we lose. So, that's an interesting posture.
I wasn't going to say that, but you're the objective neutral guy. It sure does look that way to me.
I don't know. I read this stuff every morning, from 1 to 6 o'clock in the morning, and it sure sounds to me like they're not all in on the war. It sounds to me, and the coverage as well is all negative. There's plenty of bad news here. It's not that. It's that there was one day this week where the, quote, narrative, end quote, of the mainstream media switched dramatically. And oddly enough, it was because of a piece that ran in Al Jazeera where the author said basically the U.S. is winning.
Yeah, yes, there is also a non-good piece of news today. An F-35 got hit by something. It was able to land, but we didn't think that was possible. So that's not a good bit of news. Let's close with a bit of good news, though I'm a little bit worried. I have birder friends like Dan Poneman, and they're kind of crazy about birding. And now if it turns out that birding is good for your brain, I really fear getting forced into the birding world. It seems a little eccentric, and it seems resource intensive.
Well, Hugh, we have a weekly newsletter called Bird News Items. And it's now scientifically proven that it prevents dementia. So my advice to you is get with the program, get yourself a subscription to Bird News Items, and you'll be doing this show well into your 90s.
Are you a birder? I thought family members were birders.
No, okay. My brother is a former board member of the Cornell Ornithology Lab, which is sort of the MIT of birds. And he's the sort of person that goes to Minnesota to look, to the Iron Range in Minnesota to look for a specific bird. In other words, he's crazy, but apparently he's not demented.
Well, great. He's going to be doing it for a long time. I also have to tell the audience, John stuck in that the Buckeyes lost last night. However, the Redhawks, the Miami Redhawks, play this afternoon. So Ohio is still represented, John Ellis. We're not down yet. We're not out yet. John Ellis, thank you. Get your news items by going to Google and just news items, John Ellis. It will take you there. This one Substack that every morning will make you as smart as anybody else. To the Commentary Podcast, as he was this morning. He's also part of a, I don't know, 20-hour conversation with Andrew Sullivan about Iran this week, which I found very interesting. Between Eli and Andrew and two programs by Aviv Rediger on Khomeini's the ideology, I feel like I'm overwhelmed. But Eli, let me hand you this accolade. I have been waiting for this moment for 47 years. An honest-to-goodness attempt to take down the regime. And I cannot believe that so few people are focused on how important this is. Do you think they understand how important this is?
No, and I don't think people are paying attention to the right metrics. I want to open the Strait of Hormuz like everybody else, and that is important in the short term. But the story to watch are the drones that Israel controls over Basiji checkpoints. It's the conversation that, the Wall Street Journal heard a recording of, where a Mossad officer is talking to a senior Tehran police commander, and at the end of it, he says, "I swear on the Quran, I'm already dead. Please come and save us." That's the metric that I'm looking at, not what the remaining Iranian stooges or regime officials say, not the Strait of Hormuz, not the back and forth between European allies and Trump over minesweepers and so forth. The thing that matters is the plan that I think Israel has been working on for some time, and that we're going to start seeing other parts of. It might be Reza Pahlavi who comes back. It could be people on the inside. It might be a combination of both. But I think my hope is, and I think that there is a plan to do this, that this war ends in a velvet revolution, in a color revolution, as they call it.
It is the most significant geopolitical moment since 1989, because a long-standing enemy of the United States could be cracking, and the cracking might go on for some period of time, and there are costs to that cracking, including economic costs, and the Strait of Hormuz is an inconvenience. But the Battle of the Atlantic almost starved Great Britain to death. This is not that. This is $1 more a gallon of gas and production problems for Japan, China, and India. It's not the end of the civilized world. So I don't even think it's that big of a military problem once you get your assets in place. It's 23 miles long. We have two MEUs coming now, one from Asia, one from San Diego, I believe, two big decks with Marines on them. There's a lot of stuff we can do. I mean, why do people want us to lose? It just seems like a lot of American media wants us to lose.
Well, to put it charitably, or to maybe steel man the other side, I think that so many people who follow Iran policy and this conflict, they can't imagine a world without the Iranian regime, without the Islamic Republic. It's hard for them to even imagine it. So they just kind of revert back to, of course, there'll be some regime that sticks around after this war. David Ignatius, who I think is a fine reporter, but his column he wrote this week is about, there has to be, clear winnable goals and, to think about sort of an exit ramp. And he gives his thoughts on it. And my view is that even if the combat operations end and there's a rump of the regime in place, I think we have to really work. The world has to hope that Israel and the Iranian people and what they have cooking ultimately works. And I can see it. I'm hoping it does.
Oh, for the last year, I've been reading with Larry Arnn this book, The Gathering Storm. And the one thing that looking back to the 30s tells me is if England and France had fought a complicated, risky battle with Germany in the 30s, the world would not have burned. And this regime has revealed itself. That's the biggest takeaway for the first 3 weeks from me, Eli. I want to know what you think of the first 3 weeks. The nature of the regime, it's actually for 2 months now since they murdered 35,000 of their own people, but they're firing at the Al-Aqsa Mosque now. They have absolutely no inhibitions about chaos because chaos is their theology.
Yes, 100%. And I would say this as well. All of the people who think that we're losing the war and are focusing on negative elements, contrast that with the governments of our Gulf allies, including now Qatar, that are
Yep.
all in. That right there, they have the skin in the game. You think we're sacrificing because at the pump? United Arab Emirates, they're really feeling the brunt of it because the Iranians are firing at hotels and civilian targets in their airport and so forth. They're saying keep going. They want to finish the job. That tells me everything I need to know. It also tells me that the Iranian theory of this war was all wrong. They thought they could intimidate our allies to regret hosting our bases. The opposite happens. It strengthened their resolve. And now Iran
Yep.
is, I've never seen a country this isolated before. Not even Russia and China last week voted against the UN Security Council resolution condemning Iran's behavior. It's incredible. They were abstentions on that. They have zero
But
allies in the world right now.
I
It's
do
amazing.
want to ask you for a worst case scenario. If I understand the Mosaic plan, Iran divides into 30 to 35 different regions, each with a commander in chief, each with missile supplies, and they can wage guerrilla war in the mountains and the plains and the deserts for years to come. Is that the worst case scenario?
That would be a pretty bad one. I think another worst case scenario is, and I don't see signs of this happening, is that if something happened and Trump dramatically just withdrew without any kind of agreement, that would give the Iranian regime a sense of victory that was left, and then they would then proceed to slaughter even more of their own civilians to sort of teach the people a lesson. And we would have a weakened regime in place, but one that would kind of feel emboldened that they were managed to survive a war against the great powers. That
I,
would be a pretty bad
I
case
hadn't even
scenario too.
I hadn't considered that, Eli, because the one
I
guy
don't think
who's
Trump's
not for
going to back
cracking
out.
is Donald Trump. I just
100%. I
can't see
think
him.
that's right. I can't see it either.
Now, the politics, MAGA has not splintered. Some
No.
traditional Republicans who hate Trump still hate Trump, and so they're against the war. Some of the national security elite think it was a bad idea, but they've been isolated from the rest of the country for a long time. Is there any political risk here other than losing?
Well, I mean, losing is a huge political risk because then you'll get
Yeah.
the podcaster class that is against it doing a series of I told you so's, and they'll probably blame Israel and the people who support Israel in the country. So losing would be bad, but that's true in every war, Hugh. I mean, it's better to win, and I think Trump gets that more than anyone. So I think he wants to win it. I think he's focused on that. And then at that point,
Yeah.
it'll be very interesting to see what becomes of MAGA and what becomes of what might be called the dissidents within MAGA, who have very big platforms, but apparently not many followers, at least in terms of the
We will
polls.
see. Not much influence. Big platforms, not
Yeah,
much influence. Eli, I think you're doing yeoman's work. Keep writing, keep
you
reporting
too.
at the
Thank
Free
you.
Press and at the Breaking History. The episode with Andrew Sullivan is just so much fun. Andrew's been on this program twice. One, we threw bricks at each other for an hour and a half, and then we had a love in 10 years later. So I
Okay,
really think it's
there you go.
fine. Excellent conversation. Eli Lake, follow him on X at
Thank you.
Eli Lake. Read him in the Free Press. Listen to Breaking History. Matt Continetti is the Senior Fellow for Domestic Affairs at the American Enterprise Institute, also a columnist for the Wall Street Journal. Had a very good column today in the Journal on the complexities of the Iran war. Matt Continetti, I want to begin by asking you to describe how you see the first 3 weeks of the battle with Iran.
Well, Hugh, I think the first 3 weeks of the battle with Iran have been an overwhelming military success for the United States and for Israel. I think we're rapidly pursuing our main objectives, which is ending the nuclear threat, destroying the missile threat, destroying Iran's ability to foment terrorism in the region through its proxies, and then laying the groundwork, the conditions for a potential regime collapse, where the boots on the ground are not American or Israeli soldiers, but they're the Iranian people themselves. So I think we've made extraordinary progress along all of those lines. There have been some costs, but I think compared with what has been gained, those costs have been minimal. And right now we've had this new challenge in the last week or so with the Strait of Hormuz. But the battle for the strait, for control of the strait, for the safe passage of all the vessels that transit through the strait, I think will be won by the United States, has to be won for the future of the world and for freedom of navigation. It will just take a little bit more time.
You know, Matt, I've been telling people this all week long. I'm somewhat of an amateur student of World War II. The Battle of the Atlantic, which ranged over 2 years, that was about actually whether Great Britain would have anything to eat. The Strait of the Hormuz is about the cost of gasoline and whether or not Japan, India, and China can operate at full capacity. It's not an existential crisis for the world. It's a crisis of economy, but not anything remotely like the severity of a serious battle at sea. And I also don't think it's a problem that we won't be able to solve once we have a chance to turn our attention to it. Do you?
Well, I think we're already turning our attention to it, Hugh. You know, one of the interesting things to come out of yesterday's briefing from Secretary Hegseth and Chairman Kane was that the United States has now introduced the A-10 Warthog, my favorite aircraft, and Apache
Yes.
helicopters to the fight. What that means is that those are close air support platforms. They fly low. And I think what they're doing is engaging in hunt and destroy missions for these fast boats and mine layers in the strait. So that means that we're already tackling that challenge. Of course, we dropped the 5,000-pound bombs earlier this week along the Iranian coast to go after the missile and drone teams that have been harassing traffic through the strait. It'll take some time to get our naval assets in place, but I think it's achievable. I think what we've seen in the past month, 3 weeks, not even a month, is the overwhelming ability of the United States to achieve its military objectives, especially when working with a capable ally and willing ally like we have in the state of Israel. It's really something to behold. And, you know, your mention of World War II just made me think, Hugh, could you imagine if we had today's media covering the Second World War? 3 weeks after Pearl Harbor, the New York Times, The Economist, all of the networks, CNN, they'd be saying the Japanese are winning, Hitler's on the march, Roosevelt's strategy failing.
Do you remember the D-Day rehearsal that resulted in the deaths of thousands of Americans and Brit troops because the rehearsal went bad and the tide was wrong? I mean, we had so many screw-ups in that. Let me ask you about the worst-case scenario thus far. The Iranians are firing at the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Western Wall. They're trying to actually hit the third most sacred place in Sunni Islam. Doesn't matter much of the Shias. Karbala does. But are they out of their minds?
Well, I think the answer to that question is unfortunately yes. I mean, this is why Iran is a threat. This is why we can't allow the Iranian regime to obtain nuclear weapons. They're apocalyptic religious fanatics. And that goes down through several layers of the regime. I forgot to mention in my summary of all we've accomplished militarily that in the opening moments, the United States and Israel decapitated the Iranian leadership. 41 major leaders, including the Ayatollah. The replacement Ayatollah, Khamenei's son, has not been seen publicly. It's unclear whether it's unclear whether he's alive, much less what condition he may be in. So I think the behavior of this regime is in fact revealing why it was necessary for the United States and Israel to take the action they have taken. When you're considering that they've launched missiles against 12 different countries, when they are holding civilian populations at risk, when they're trying to hold the global economy at risk, and now they're targeting Islam's own religious sites, you see how they could not be allowed to obtain nuclear weapons and why it was better to strike now rather than wait until it was too late.
They are making the case for President Trump. I asked a naval historian friend of mine what sort of an attack, a decapitation attack, could have been done by Imperial Japan upon the American military in December of 41. He wrote back, on December 7, 41, we had less than 200 flag and general officers across the Army, Air Corps, Navy, and Marine Corps. Within the U.S. government, there were 22 civilian and national security leaders. So 222. And we would have been on our back for a year and a half trying to, if they gotten George Marshall and Nimitz and a bunch of the other people who took over, we wouldn't have known what to do. How do you imagine it is in Iran right now, Matt? You're pretty imaginative. What's it like?
I have an overactive imagination. Well, look, I think it's clear that the leadership is in disarray. I think it's clear that there is some dissension in the ranks. It's hard to tell how much because Iran is a black box right now, because the regime has shut off the internet, because they're going after people inside Iran who have the Starlink terminals to connect with the wider world. We don't really know. But we do know that when you're getting down to the second and third levels of leadership, these are folks who are not at the top of their game. And just think, Hugh, the strike against Qasem Soleimani in January of 2020 that Trump ordered, the kind of commander-in-chief of Iranian terrorism, if you will, that truly disrupted the Quds Force that he ran and the IRGC's operations and denied them a real kind of strategic brain. And think of that. That's how many Soleimanis have been killed through this operation, through targeted strikes, or through just the general course of the war. When you have Israel contacting actual Basij militia commanders, this is the militia that really enforces the rule of the regime on the street. When you have Israel contacting individual commanders and saying, we know where you are, we know what you're up to, you better be ready to join the revolution when it comes, you can understand that the intelligence penetration that we have there, the just general confusion, the potential dissension. You have reports of IRGC and Basij commanders not showing up for work. Yeah, I think they're in disarray. But I will say this. I think the regime planned for this. And so this concept of mosaic defense that they've been deploying, where it's decentralized. And these missile and drone teams, they're just operating on their own. And what it means is they can still pack a punch, not as severe a punch as at the start of the war, much less years ago. They can still pack a punch. And so it's very imperative that we continue the operation until those missile and drone teams are devastated, can't operate anymore.
They can also drive their missile truck deep into the woods, throw the keys as far as they can, and start walking out. I just keep thinking, if you fire that thing, you'd better be very, very fast. You've just got to run very, very fast. Have our allies surprised you in any way?
I think they have surprised me, Hugh. I think the United Kingdom, in particular, has really surprised me. Maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, considering Keir Starmer's atrocious record on the Middle East, recognition of the state of Palestine after October 7th attacks on Israel, its general kind of appeasement posture he's taken toward Islamism in general, the domestic concerns, the links between radicalism and the Labour Party he runs. Maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, but I do think that their initial reaction to President Trump's call for an alliance to free the strait in a way that will benefit Europe and China most of all. America is energy independent. Sure, the market for oil is global, so our gas prices are rising. But really, the oil that flows through the strait is benefiting Europe and China more than it does the United States. So yeah, France has surprised me. Some of the other allies. Now it seems like they're kind of understanding that they're the losers if they don't contribute to some type of multifaceted.
Secretary General Ruta is doing his best to kind of slap them and throw a little cold water bucket in their face. Let me talk to you a little bit about the ideology of the enemy. Our new ally is Israel. And I listen to Aviv Reddy Gur and Amit Segal and Nadav Eyal and Michael Oren because they are now our closest enemy in the world when it comes to interoperability, and we ought to understand the war from their perspective. Aviv did 2 long shows for Ask Aviv Anything, number 93 and number 99, on the ideology of the Khomeiniist, which is different from the Al-Qaeda ideology, the Sunni extremism. The Shia extremism is a blend of Marxism and end times eschatology. Have you seen any mainstream American outlet attempt to explain the ideology of what we're up against here?
No, I haven't. I mean, I think it goes back to what we were talking about before the break on the way the media has approached this war, it's really remarkable. I mean, the coverage in Western media is so one-sided against the United States, against Israel, against Trump, that it's even kind of remarkable to think that we could get an article or a television segment, like you suggest, actually exploring this 12th imamism from the Shiite radicals that govern Iran. It's very different from 20 years ago. You know, after we were attacked on 9/11, there was a huge kind of cottage industry about why they hate us, right? And Bernard Lewis kind of jumped to the top of the bestseller lists, explaining what had gone wrong in the Middle East. And of course, even when we launched the war in Iraq in 2003, yes, there was a debate, but most Democrats sided with the operation. They turned against it later when the insurgency started killing American troops. Now we've like fast forwarded right to the end game where Democrats are uniformly against the war. The media is totally negative in its coverage, and yet if you actually take a step back and look at what's happening, America and Israel are succeeding in our military campaign. And when the situation is bad, Hugh, when you have to turn to Al Jazeera for a fair and balanced explanation of what's going on in Iran. An excellent article by an analyst in Al Jazeera who points out in Qatar-sponsored media that America is winning in Iran, which is, I think, what is happening. But you won't hear that in almost any news outlet, much less some type of investigative reporting on the ideology of our adversary.
Well, I do want to have my audience hear from you, Matt. The best case scenario. I don't think anyone understands how important this is. China is our pacing adversary. They are our greatest threat. Russia is a gas station with nuclear weapons. We understand that. But Iran is a malignant force in the world. What would the world look like if that regime collapsed?
Well, it would be a much safer world. There's no question about that. It's already a much safer world because the United States and Israel have devastated the Iranian war machine. They've tackled and trounced the nuclear program. The missiles are down. Not just the missiles, but the missile production, the drone production facilities, they're gone. The Navy is sunk. It's already a safer world. Without the Iranian regime, you would have chance for real peace in the Middle East. You would have the main source of terrorism around the world gone from the face of the earth. You'd also weaken that axis of aggression you mentioned, because not only have we now taken Venezuela's oil, right, and are using it with the United States' strategic purposes in mind, an Iran that was pro-Western, or at least not hostile to the United States, may take a very different approach to China and may not supply the Shahed drones to Russia to be used against Ukraine, which, by the way, Hugh, as you know, is actually making gains on the battlefield right now. Ukraine is reclaiming lost ground. So I think we're at a
last point. A question, Matt. If you're the Republicans, the Pentagon asked for $200 billion. Do you put your arms around that in a reconciliation and jam it through, get the Budget Committee and the Appropriations Committee and the Armed Services Committee to do a straight reconciliation? We can do that. 51 votes in the Senate, a simple majority in the House, and just jam it through and put your arms around the war and say it's a good war, it's a just war, it's good for the world, and we're Republicans and we support it. What do you think of that?
Well, I think you have to put it to the Democrats first. I think you have to get the Democrats on record. Are the Democrats really going to vote against resupplying our forces while they're engaged in a fight against a deadly enemy? Our casualties have been minimal, as I said, but really, that's what the Democrats are going to do. You're going to show them, if they do vote against it, for kind of the Trump deranged opposition that they are. If that vote fails, then that's when you move to reconciliation.
Interesting.
I believe that we should make a political debate about this, really. And once the votes are on the record, if it doesn't go through, okay, then you use your 51 vote majority to get the troops what they need to finish this fight against a terrorist enemy.
Better thought. That's why you were at AEI. Matt Continetti, thank you as always. Follow him at Continetti. Read his Wall Street Journal piece today in the Free Expressions vertical. on whether or not President Trump ought to make the traditional appeal to the American people about national interest, which he's not yet done. Matt and I diverge a little bit on that, but it's okay. It's a small deal. Go and read it. And thank you, Matt. Time for my Relief Factor, though. I'm in the Relief Factor studio inside the Beltway. There's the packet I take every single day. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you see it every single day. It's not made up. It's really doing. It's a live deal. I've been taking Relief Factor for 13 years, and I get my miles in. I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Tomorrow morning, it's at least 7, and we'll see how much more it is. It's going to be in the 50s, so that's a decent trundling weather. And it hadn't been decent all week. I got a couple of 5s in, but nothing to brag about. So trying to stretch it out a little bit as spring approaches. Relief Factor will make it easier. I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. All you have to do is call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF. Only supplement I've taken for more than 20 years. I've been taking it for 13 years. I love it. Give it a try for 3 weeks, $19.95, less than $1 a day, and then make up your mind. Forget about the Aleve and the ibuprofen and the Advil and all the other stuff. Give Relief Factor a try. All natural, the only supplement I've taken. I don't want to take any other ones, but you should give it a try. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. Find that starter pack. Now, let me talk to you about our friends at Food for the Poor. You know, I talk to you every day about this, and some of you turn off the radio. Okay, God sees that. Just kidding. Not. And the least and the lost are out there. You cannot see them. You know intellectually that they are there, and you know intellectually that in mountaintops in Guatemala, in villages in the outback of Haiti, there is no water that is clean that is not brought there by not-for-profits, number one of which is Food for the Poor. So if you want to help the lost and the least this Lent, do so please with a contribution via Food for the Poor. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. Here's Paul Jacobs talking about what we do.
That's where we're going, where people feel forgotten. That's why this campaign matters. People in Latin America and the Caribbean with poor water quality, that with every sip of water, it is making them sick. We are here to let these families know they're not forgotten. And the darkness of poverty, the darkness of having poor water, we can shed some light on those families with a gift.
3 ways you can change a life. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com, perfectly secure. It says Giving Living Water. Give Living Water. $50, get clean water to 2 children for a year. And the banner, you cannot miss it, not even a Steelers fan. Number 2, call 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. One more time, 855-359-4673. And for the youngs who love to text my name, Hewitt, to 51555. 51555. If you can give 50, great. If you can give more, even greater, because you are taking care of the lost and the least. War rages. There are places we cannot help. We can help in Central America and Haiti, and we do it through Food for the Poor. Your contribution is tax deductible. I thank you in advance for your generosity. Joined as I am on Fridays when we are lucky with Ben Domenech. He's the head of the Daily Wire's commentary section. He's a Fox News contributor. He's a friend of the program. Ben, I want to start by saying I watched the Daily Wire with you, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles. Who was the 4th person at the shootout at the OK Corral?
Andrew Clavin.
All right, Andrew was there. Andrew was ducking the whole time. I think that is the McLaughlin Group reborn. I think you guys should do that every week. Maybe bring in Mary Catherine Ham so you don't lose, composure. But is that a regular feature? That's gonna score an enormous hit every week.
Well, I will tell you this, Hugh. This was my first experience with it, and thanks for being so kind about it. I just got back from Nashville yesterday, and I will tell you that the folks there were like, "That's the hottest thing we've put out in a long time." And I was like, "Well, let's do it again." And so I think we're both on the same wavelength. We'll see what
appointment viewing is everything. My best advice to podcasters is put out the same amount on the days, like Ruthless is Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, let people know, do it. But that was McLaughlin Group fun. And I haven't had that much fun in a long time. Because, I mean, poor Michael's got do you know the Catholic disability? You can't call someone an anti-Semite. You cannot do it. So I don't know if Ben knew that, but he couldn't say what Ben wanted him to say. But he didn't pull the Catholic card, so much respect to everyone involved. Now to the issue. Straight up explanation. How do you describe the first 3 weeks of the war?
I would describe them as both phenomenally militarily impressive, but also I would say that in terms of the communication with the American people, I think it needs to improve and improve significantly. You can't just have the president out there saying, trust us, things are going to be okay, or JD out there saying this is only temporary. That's not enough. I think they need to be more specific about, this is what's going to happen. And I think that is a good example of that actually is just what played out in the last, 48, 72 hours where, the president says, well, I think the Europeans are going to come around. And then you start to actually see the Europeans, at least, reluctantly having their arms twisted in the direction of coming around. And I think that that's important. They are hit more by the strait being closed than we are. It's an indirect hit for us. It's a direct hit for them. And I think that explaining that to the American people would be very helpful. But I also think that there are limits, again, to what you can do with that. And the president really, as he made note of this week, he likes the idea of surprise. And so it's one of these things where I think the White House would be well served to have more people out there and have, I think too much of the focus, to be quite honest right now, is on Pete. They're kind of using him as their main messenger to the people, and the press has glommed onto that. So is Saturday Night Live. And Pete should be one voice among many. It should not just be, kind of him standing out there and making what I think are actually, cogent and coherent arguments. And by the way, taking some tough questions too, despite what you might hear from the media. I just think that you need more of it. I think you need more people who are out there who are talking about what we're doing and why. And I think the administration would be well served if they took that under advisement.
How do you grade the American media legacy division on a patriotism scale?
I mean, is there something worse than fail, Hugh? Is it possible? Is it possible that they could flunk out of school entirely on this test? I mean, here's and you know this. Here's the great and ridiculous nature of what they're doing here. Many of these people are the same exact people who warned that the Iranian regime was such a great threat to the American people and to the future of the world that we had to do what Barack Obama wanted to do when it came to those pallets of cash and everything else associated with that terrible deal. That was the justification at the time. And then they were the same people who, when protesters were getting slaughtered in the streets in Iran, were basically calling out Trump and saying, well, he's not actually going to do anything to help them because that would be difficult and dangerous and, could blow back. And he's not courageous enough to actually live up to sending help or something along those lines. They have completely gone in the opposite direction, and they're going back with frequency to the same people who arranged for that stupid deal in the first place, which, of course, bolstered the regime, gave them the kind of cash that they could play around with, allowed them to project power more around the region, and put us in this position in the first place that we had to rely on the Israelis to scale them back over the last year to such a degree that we could have the opportunity to do this. There is absolutely no willingness to look in the mirror on this. And, just on a patriotism scale, let's set that aside for a second. How about a faith scale? I don't know about you, Hugh, but when I, typically, any church that is, when you're listening to a prayer that invokes St. Michael to protect our troops overseas, whether you're listening to something from the Book of Common Prayer that calls for the protection of our leaders and our troops, this is something that is as normal of a Christian activity as you possibly can have. At the Daily Wire right now, we have a piece from Daniela Greenbaum saying that as a Jew, she could not possibly be offended by what Pete Hegseth said about praying for our troops. And the fact that Margaret Brennan, someone who has one of these legacy media positions that should be reconsidered at the top of Face the Nation, would call that into question is absurd. It is absolutely
Barry Weiss needs
a Christian nationalist statement. Come on. I mean, that's
I've given Barry a lot of time. This one That
You got
rope,
it. Come on. Yeah,
it's got to be over.
On this. Yeah.
Now let me ask you about the other side. When we went to war with Imperial Japan and not long thereafter Nazi Germany, American media worked hard at letting us know how evil they were. Have you seen any single episode of network news explain the Iranian regime over 47 years and how depraved, malignant, and medieval it is? It may be the worst regime on earth because it doesn't even work to provide minimum levels of food to its people.
You know, the astounding nature of this, by the way, Hugh, is that is, regardless of your position ideologically, whether you think this is a good war to fight, a good war to have, you know, whether you support the president or oppose him, that's an important story. That's an important story in the world to tell. And the fact that they're looking in the opposite direction, I mean, look at the blip that this latest round of slaughter has had in terms of the public executions of people who participated in this. You would think that it was something that exists. And I mean, I haven't seen the data on it, so I don't want to speak to it, but it seems to exist entirely in the conservative or right of center ecosphere that something like that happened. And to me, it is incumbent upon these institutions to tell that story. And basically, you know, if you do tell that story, the idea that is going to in some way cater to the current administration, again, is just a complete denial of their responsibility as media entities. You have to tell that story regardless of your position on the current war.
And have they prepared it? I think the enemy is not to be underestimated because of the mosaic approach. They've broken into 31 military districts, 31 commanders in chief. They all have missiles. It could be like the proverbial Japanese imperial soldier on an island somewhere not knowing that they'd lost. This could go on a long time, Ben.
Yeah, and I think that we are, you know, seeing right now a ground being laid for something that can happen only internally. And then, look, the president is going to take some steps, I think, here that more of his supporters may question, including the deployment of Marines, including what he could be doing, I think, in already being, sort of telegraphed. But one thing to keep in mind, too, is that, you know, this is a military that has been preparing for this for a very long time. We have done the kind of wargaming on this, the kind of tests before that led us to this point, and that we've seen the results that they've been able to achieve, and frankly, the targeting that the Israelis have been able to achieve. With, you know, our assistance in some ways, but really on their own as well.
You know, Ben, you let us know that you were a nerd when you were a little kid and you watched the 1991 invasion, you know, taking notes, and so you watched 2001, 2003 very closely. This makes those look like Tinker Toys. This is remarkable.
It is remarkable, and I mean the speed at which, I mean, I had notebooks filled of, you know, this is what the news is saying today. And it would, you know, and by the way, when I say the news, I'm talking about NPR and CBS and NBC and ABC. News. I'm talking about Peter Jennings. I'm talking about, you know, we were reliant on a news broadcast medium that was telling the story of the war as it happened, and not basically a bunch of people sitting around a table at CNN headquarters debating, you know, whatever the latest Truth Social post is, which is what they do. And it is just not media anymore.
It's Scott Jennings slapping down Josh Rogan, something of which has gone wrong with him. Ben Domenech, his brand new Big Ben Domenech podcast, is available wherever podcasts are. One of his guests is Jamie Kirchick, who's one of my favorite reporters. His book on Secret Washington. Am I remembering the name correctly, Ben, about being gay in Washington up until
the Secret History of Gay Washington.
Yeah, it's a fabulous bit of reporting. Who knew? And he's a great, smart guy. You two got in to the Republican Party, and whether or not Marco Rubio has to be thinking about challenging J.D. Vance. Now, I tend to think people overstate J.D.'s, quote, retainer credentials. I think he's a Marine, or he's a grunt. But what do you explain to people what you and Jamie were talking about? Because it's fascinating.
Well, I think that, you know, the thing that is really weighing on people right now is that a lot of this, I view everything that's going on right now as a proxy war over JD. And everything is perhaps an exaggeration, but it's not too far. You know, the fight that the Wall Street Journal is having with Tulsi Gabbard, blaming her as a Their reference, I think, was to a resistance wing inside the Trump administration. I don't think that's true at all, by the way. The fight that's happening over Joe Kent, the fight that Tucker Carlson is having, this is all kind of as a proxy over the fact, and Ben Shapiro has pointed this out, none of these people are willing to name Trump. They're not willing to go out there and say, Trump is wrong. Trump is, instead he's had his mind melted by, nefarious Jews or what have you, who have convinced him.
Bibi is a magician, right?
Exactly.
It's the silliest damn thing.
It's, we all know, as Jamie said it more eloquently than I, but it was, we all know that Donald Trump is known as being this personality who's easily moved by all the people around him. And
oh, you bet. Power suggestion works on him very easily.
Exactly. The truth, of course, is that this is all about what comes next. And I concur with your analysis of JD. I don't think he actually is as much of a restrainer as people have said, but I think that the restrainers have glommed on to him. And by the way, it goes further than restraint because, the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan are ones about America's humility, I think, in terms of what we can achieve, but they are not the lessons, I believe, certainly, about humility, about the need for America to achieve certain things in the world. And those, I think, are two separate paths. And if you believe that, in the absence of American might, things would be worse in the world, and that in the absence of American investment in the military, et cetera, that our European allies would be totally incapable of keeping up the slack. Britain with their 2 floating ships, effectively, it's absolutely ridiculous to make those arguments. This is a proxy war that's playing out in front of us on a daily basis. They just won't actually name the people that they're being proxies for, and it's because everybody's waiting to see what's going to happen with Marco, with JD, if there is going to be some kind of contest there. And I think the further things go along, this seems to me more and more likely that there is going to be a very real contest.
I think there is, and keep your eye on Mike Pompeo, maybe even Tom Cotton. Arms for the Love of America, Irving Berlin, 1941. Ben Domenech, have you ever heard this before?
I have, actually. My grandfather had a record of Irving Berlin, but it's a long time since I've heard that.
I used to play it all the time during the Long Wars beginning in 2001 when Lilacs brought it to my attention, and he reminded me of it this week, and I bring it up in the context of the Pentagon asked for $200 billion for the war. It is my view that the Republicans ought to put their arms around that, double it, put it on a reconciliation, and make the Democrats vote against funding the military tomorrow. I mean, I would say, and we want Golden Dome, and we want Golden Fleet, and we want 3 more of everything that the Pentagon asked for so we can give them to Ukraine or whoever else. Just put their arms around it. What do you think?
Well, I agree with that, Hugh, and one of the reasons that I agree with it is that, I have said before, and I said it actually last night on Special Report, that we misunderstand the state of the American military, in part because they're so good at what they do. But when it comes to the resources that they actually have, we are climbing out of essentially 2 decades of resource deployment that has never really been backfilled the way that it ought to be. And new technology that has not necessarily come to fruition as quickly as we would like it to be. We still struggle to build basic things. The conversation around, building ships in particular, these are just skill sets that we don't have to the same degree within the population that can do those things as we need them right now. We need all the people who are currently in these various engineering schools across the country who are 18, 19 and the like. We need them now. And we don't have them yet. And so we have to do things, I think, to step that up and understand that even if we have incredible might, we look at how strained we've been just with the actions that Donald Trump has taken thus far. And that's not to say that, we are in any way, a weaker military for it. It's more just that we need more things and we need them faster. Fixing that resource situation is something that I hope this administration can take major steps toward, and I think this is an opportunity to do that.
And I hope the Republicans realize one way to hold off a disaster in the fall is to be the patriotism party because it's right. Ben, I want to ask you one more thing. By the way, 60 Minutes has posted an announcement. They're doing a segment during March Madness about shipbuilding in the United States, so I call all of your attention to that. Ben, in terms of what the fundamental message on the war should be, if you had 10 minutes with Donald Trump, what would you tell him to tell the American people about this war? Because I think it's how good the world will be when Iran is gone. But that I've already given the audience my 2 cents. What does Ben Domenech think?
I think that you add to that, because I think that's what you should lead with. I think what you add to that is, if we don't take the opportunity to kick these people, these evil, horrible people, when they are at their weakest, they will only get stronger, they will only get more desperate, and they will only get crazier. We have a unique opportunity at this moment, having chopped off so much of their leadership, the head of the snake, to lean into this and make sure that this is not a problem that future generations have to deal with. And as Donald Trump, I think he can say, and regardless of your thoughts on his past meanderings on foreign wars, he can say, look, I am in this war because I hate wars. And the future war that would have to be fought, that would be caused by a nuclear-powered Iran, by an Iran that could project power again, would be so bloody and so terrible that it would cost the lives of millions of people in our allies, including Americans, including our resources, including everything that we care about, and it would upend the world. I am working to prevent that by having a small war today that can take out something that it would be of enormous evil and horrible intent in the future. And that's, I think,
malignancy.
Americans would understand.
I think last question. You've known Senator Lindsey Graham a long, long time. He appears on this show every 6 years in an election year. Luckily, I've been on for 25 years, so I get to talk to him fairly frequently every 6 years. But he was angry this week at NATO, and I've never heard him be mad at an alliance partner before, but he was pissed. What does that mean?
To me, it means that he feels, I think accurately, that the Europeans need to pick up their freight when it comes to the Strait, and that there were I think he's gotten a lot of promises behind the scenes personally, because he's someone who likes to work behind the scenes. My vision of Lindsey, and knowing him a little bit and being from South Carolina, is that he is simply a political animal. This is a person who wakes up in the morning and goes to bed at night and only lives politics in between. And the thing that is, going on there, I think, is that he has back-channeled, he has worked, he has tried to do different things with our allies around the world because he thinks it's important to hold that alliance together. But, and he's done that sometimes working, I believe, at odds with what Donald Trump, his attitude is just kind of let him go, whatever. I think that he is frustrated with them because they know, and he knows, that they need to be part of this. They have the minesweepers to help out, clear the Strait. They have the resources that we actually would like to be brought to bear, and they have a vested interest in this. And look, a lot of this is behind-the-scenes diplomatic stuff. The Europeans, they're very touchy. They take things very personally over there. I wish they had a little bit more of an American attitude toward it, but then
more humor. So, last question. Big Ben Pod is great, but I hope you get Senator Graham and say we need 90 minutes at 2 hours, and we're just going to go unplugged, and we're going to go long, and we're just going to go wherever it goes, because I know you and you know me.
I mean, I'll tell you, that is a conversation that could deal with a lot of things. So I will take that under advisement, because I know
it could be a two-parter.
You know what? Here's the thing. I know if I asked him, he would say yes. And so if that's to be if that is to be had, then you will hear it.
Okay, because I think the voters of South Carolina would love it. He's going to win anyway, but I would love it because I think he's a lot more complicated than people know, but his patriotism is so obvious and his love of freedom is so significant that if he was comfortable with the interviewer and didn't have his gloves up, it would be a fabulous interview. Great work on the Big Ben podcast this week and the Daily Wire, Ben. Thank you for joining me, as always. Always a pleasure talking to you. Like and subscribe the Big Ben podcast. Like and subscribe the Big Ben podcast. President Trump had a White House gaggle late this afternoon. Let's cover that. Cut number 9.
Well, we've been hitting them awfully hard. I mean, I don't know if you can possibly get hit harder, but these are thugs and animals and horrible people. But you can't hit anybody harder than we've hit them. But I'm not surprised. They executed 3 young people for protest.
Cut number 10.
Well, I may have a plan or I may not, but how would I ever say that to a reporter? If I said that to a reporter, Marco would say, please, sir, let's bring you over to the helicopter immediately. right? No, I can't tell you.
They can't. Oh, yeah. We're going to Carg Island on Tuesday. Cut number 11. I don't have any audio on cut number 11.
What they have done in the Strait of Hormuz. What's your take?
Well, it deserves. He's right about asking that, and I think NATO's gone down a long way because they haven't. I mean, they should be helping with the Strait. They get much of their energy from the Strait of Hormuz, and if Lindsey Graham said that, and don't forget, he was the big NATO guy for a while, and now he's not. And a lot of senators and congressmen, they're very upset with the fact that NATO has done nothing.
And then let's go to former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Fox News today, cut number 8.
Yes, Sean, good evening. No, it is truly remarkable. It is years of work by the way, our private sector who created some of these technologies, our military who has performed unbelievably well, our partners in Israel who have also delivered a set of capabilities that is going to continue to take out the next set of leaders. If you're someone who's a mid-level or mid-senior person in the Basij or the Artesh, you have to know they know your names, they know precisely where you are, and on any given day they may come get you if they believe it's in their strategic interests. And so President Trump has now built out a remarkable coalition. The Iranians made a huge strategic mistake by firing into the Gulf. We're going after Gulf Arab assets. And now the Gulf Arabs and the United States are going to continue to pound the regime. And Sean, I'll remind those who have critiqued the president's efforts here. They always say, well, the regime hasn't fallen. We are literally less than 3 weeks into this. That regime is confused. It is weaker. It is less dangerous today after just 21 days, and it is not at its weakest yet. We don't know when it'll break or when it'll fall, but President Trump has created the conditions that will keep Americans safe for decades to come.
And here it's Victor Davis Hanson on with Sean Hannity last night, cut number 4.
There's enough evidence to see how things are really going. Europeans would never agree to go anywhere near Iran unless they thought the tide was turning and they think that we're going to win. Otherwise, they would keep still. And the reason that the petronations of the Gulf survive is they have their finger in the wind and they're very attuned to the climate. And when you have Al Jazeera praising the United States bombing campaign and saying that it's been underestimated and it's brilliant and effective, you get the feeling that they think not only should the United States finish the job, but it can and will finish the job. And then when you start to see tactical aircraft like Warthogs and Apaches, that means that they're offering almost ground and sea support to hit targets. There's no defense at all when you have that type of aircraft flying at will in Iranian airspace. So you put it all together, and I think it's pretty clear that this rope-a-dope strategy that they have, that we're going to tire before they are, is dependent on just public opinion, the midterms in the United States. And if Trump sees it through, and I think he will, I think they're going to fall pretty soon.
I think they're going to, from your lips, Victor Davis Hanson, to God's ears. Wouldn't that be great for the people of Iran and for the world? Let me tell you about something that will be great for every American who has a cell phone. There's mine. I want you to know that consumer cellular is an option you should investigate. There are lots of ways to do it. First, you can go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. My code word, by the way, is Hugh. No matter how you get in touch with them, remember Hugh, because that gets you your second month free if you make the switch. It takes about 20 minutes to switch from any other cell phone company to Consumer Cellular. You can also call 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454. Again, my code name is Hugh. Sit down with your phone bill, find out how much data you're using, then ask the representative, based here in the United States, by the way, what can you do for me, including the code name Hugh, which will be the second month free. And they will run through the rates and the different data packages. Forget free phones, they're not free. It's like undercoating on cars. Don't fall for that stuff. Stick to the plan. What's the data plan? And if you're over 50, tell them, what about that 2-line deal that Hewitt talks about? 2 lines, unlimited data, $60 a month. And they'll say, yeah, we can do that for you. And I get my second month for free. And they said, yeah, if you use the code name that you should have known, and you'll know that the code name is Hugh. 1-800-411-4454. Or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. President Trump welcomed the midshipmen to the White House today for the presentation of the Commander-in-Chief Cup. He had a couple things to say. Cut number 5.
I want to begin by just saying we're doing extremely well in Iran. The difference between them and us is they had a Navy 2 weeks ago. They have no Navy anymore. It's all at the bottom of the sea. 58 ships knocked down in 2 days. And we have the greatest Navy anywhere in the world. It's not even close. But we are doing really well. We're not going to let them have nuclear weapons, because if they had them, they'd use them, and we're not going to let that happen. Should have been done a long time ago by other presidents.
He also added cut number 6.
It's amazing. It's not, I don't want to get too crazy here. Not a contest. It's not even a contest. They do whatever they want. They had a lot of great equipment. Russian equipment, Chinese equipment, they had plenty of money. That equipment was useless against us, useless. No force on earth can beat the American sailors or the American military. We're the strongest in the world by far. To those standing behind.
And he went on to greet and thank the young men and women who are going to serve this country in uniform for at least 4 years after their graduation, some for 40. And we are lucky to have the service academies, the ROTC, the OSC people out there. Very, very lucky. Now, I've been listening to a few podcasts and broadcasts on the BBC about the state of the British military after the HMS Dragon could not get underway for 2 weeks to Cyprus after Cyprus, British sovereign soil, was hit by Iran. And they couldn't get a ship out. They've got, it turns out, 13 warships in addition to their 2 carriers. That's not enough for an escort for 2 carriers, but it's not just the Navy. This is Sir Richard Behrens with BBC's David Aronovich, cut number 1.
Richard Behrens, what's happened to the size of the British Armed Forces since the end of the Cold War?
When the Cold War ended in 1990, nobody in the UK could point to the sort of existential threat that was going to justify retaining the sort of large armed forces nearly already all the time that you needed during the Cold War. So over the succeeding 35 years or so, the army has, broadly speaking, halved in size from around 150,000 and 73,000 reserves to today about 70,000 regulars and a reserve of only 23,000. The Air Force in 1990 had 850 combat jets, and today it's got 160. Though we need to recognise they're much better than the Cold War era ones. And the Navy had 50 major surface combatant ships, destroyers and frigates and things in 1989, and now it's got 13, and it can't even get all 13 to sea at once. The conundrum that we live with today, and it is profoundly important, is we've now entered a very new era in global affairs of much greater risk, but we're entering it with the armed forces we were left with for a much more comfortable, peaceful time.
He went on, cut number 2.
So the armed forces that we have now, because of their size, but also because of their sophistication, can make a very small contribution on land, in the air and at sea to an enterprise that's either led by the US or more likely a NATO undertaking. What it cannot do is anything substantial on its own.
What is it that we can offer in an alliance, and what is it that, if we had to, we could actually achieve on our own?
So it's important to recognise that the UK has made commitments to NATO, which NATO expects the UK to fulfil. And for the Royal Navy, they do 2 big things. They provide the independent strategic nuclear deterrent, 20% of the UK defence budget. And their main commitment is in the North Atlantic. It's called the North Atlantic Bastion, where their job is to control that sea from intrusion by Russian submarines, ships, and aircraft. And that takes up pretty much all the Royal Navy's capability in rotation.
So, not much. The answer is not much. But I hope you're sitting down. Cut number 3.
The Army is committed to NATO as a strategic reserve corps. This is a force of somewhere between 30 and 50,000 strong, so a corps headquarters and 2 divisions that could go anywhere in NATO where there was a need to reinforce deterrence or to recover from, say, a Russian territorial incursion. But the Army has not got the equipment or the training or the support to get anywhere close to delivering that yet. So Today's army, frankly, could do one very small thing. Essentially, it could seize a small market town on a good day. And the Air Force, which has very good aircraft, makes a contribution to the NATO air and space effort. But we are talking about using, generally speaking, no more than about 20 combat aircraft from the pool of around 160.
All right, you heard that right, but I'm going to play it for you again. This is Sir Richard Behrens with BBC's David Aronovich, cut number 3.
The army is committed to NATO as a strategic reserve corps. This is a force of somewhere between 30 and 50,000 strong, so a corps headquarters and 2 divisions that could go anywhere in NATO where there was a need to reinforce deterrence or to recover from, say, a Russian territorial incursion. But the army has not got the equipment or the training or the support to get anywhere close to delivering that yet. So today's army, frankly, could do one very small thing. Essentially, it could seize a small market town on a good day. And the Air Force, which has very good aircraft, makes a contribution to the NATO air and space effort. But we are talking about using, generally speaking, no more than about 20 combat aircraft from the pool of around 160.
Boy, that's brutal. Boy, that's brutal. Please remember our friends in the Caribbean. Food for the Poor, the banner at the top of HughHewitt.com. It says give living water. It's Lent, it's Friday. Maybe some of you are on your way to Stations of the Cross. Maybe some of you forgot Stations of the Cross. How about a $50 contribution to Food for the Poor? Food for the Poor, a Christian organization, began with Catholic priests in Central America, realizing they're just people with nothing. Clean water is step number 1, and basic food is step number 2, and that's what Food for the Poor does. They keep their overhead low. They consistently deliver with partner churches throughout the region. They're in Haiti when no one else is left in Haiti. Please be as generous as you can. It is Lent, the lost and the least. They're served by Food for the Poor. You can call them at 1-855-359-4673. That's 855-359-4673. Or go to HughHewitt.com and find the banner at the top. Give living water. Time for the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, you. Happy day after St. Joseph's Day, you. This is a month of a week of 2 religious holidays, St. Patrick and St. Joseph. And so my thoughts turned to holidays. My favorite month was February when I was a kid. We had 2 separate holidays for presidents. We did. But the man who named the city, he made the woke folks tingly, so we celebrate collectively as not to praise him singly. We jettisoned Columbus Day. It wasn't to their likings, but overlooked Leif Erikson. You know about those Vikings. Churchill's off the British pound, perhaps for Harry Potter. No, it's been decided it's a hedgehog or an otter. They pushed aside Paul Bunyan. They said he was a myth. And the graceless Philly Flyers, they canceled poor Kate Smith. Trump's name on a theater, it made them mad and Flemish. They want to stick with JFK, a name without a blemish. From the wrath of liberals, not one man escapes. They're canceling their heroes now. I call that sour grapes. The funny thing about the left, and this is really bats, they still wear Che Guevara shirts and Chairman Mao green hats. Let's do away with holidays. They're far too esoteric. But if we have to celebrate, let's make them all generic. So what are you doing for the long Poets' Day weekend?
Well, I am not with you on this. We need to bring back Washington's birthday as it's my birthday. So that's my only campaign, Joe. I just want Washington's birthday restored. The rest of it, nah. But Joe, a fine poem.
I'm with you.
That's going to be over at tarzanajoe.com by end of business, I assume. Is the button working for people who need a poem?
Working wonderfully. But I do caution people, when I email them back, sometimes my emails go to their spam and I have to reach out to them by text message, which I do. But take a look at your spam because, I'm not in your safe list when you hit I want a poem. And so check that out. Look at your spam because I respond in 24 hours.
Anything unusual, or is it just weddings and retirements?
I had a beautiful request yesterday, which I will tell you about once I speak to the client to see that if I can share it with you. It's
All right.
about an adoption, and it's really quite beautiful.
Fair enough. We will wait word on that. Meanwhile, TarzanaJoe.com. Hit the I Need a Poem. His rates are reasonable. He is the only working poet upon whom you can rely, as he's been doing this for how many years for us, Joe?
20 plus years, Hugh.
20 plus years. That's a lot of poems. His books, by the way, are also at TarzanaJoe.com, and they're always guaranteed to amuse and to inspire. Thank you, Joe.